charge and he will come.
For you?
جبريل هذا يوش. من عمل charge كان له بعد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. So alhamdulillah, we are continuing our halaqah series on the concept of the aql in Islam, on the concept of the intellect, and discussing critical thinking from an Islamic perspective. And mashallah, we've had several classes now, and so I want to take a moment to summarize some of the main lessons that we've discussed in the previous classes. So we've been focusing on how the concept of critical thinking and rationality in Islam and the Islamic tradition differs from what we find in modern culture. It differs from what we find in Western philosophy, and how we as Muslims can cherish and treasure the Islamic concept of rationality and use that to understand some of the problems that are taking place in the world today that result from the human being losing this appropriate concept of rationality. So who can mention some of the points that we described that talk about the difference between the concept of reason between Islam and the West? What are some of the points that we mentioned so far? Yes?
The differences being that in the West, it's only basically looking at specific traditions, and it's not holistic.
Okay.
It's more focused on, one thing, mathematics, so you're just a master in that. Whereas Islamic ethos is centered not only in secular sciences, but it's centered in a moralistic order that is linked with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the relationship of the ubudiyyah of the Rabb.
Right.
So it's centered in a very different way. The whole foundation of looking at things, of aql, of intellect, is different.
MashaAllah. So that's excellent. So you mentioned several of the differences. So number one, yes, no, go ahead. Yeah. Right. Okay. Excellent. So let's make this number one. So number one, the difference between the concept of the aql from the Islamic perspective and from the Western perspective is that from the Islamic perspective, morality is tied to rationality. You cannot talk about being a smart person but being unethical. From an Islamic perspective, it doesn't make sense. The very meaning of the word aql implies that you are restraining yourself from immoral actions. So a civilization cannot be a nation that commits immoral actions. Like we see what's happening in the genocide in Gaza. This is the absence of civilization. This is the absence of morality. Right? So this is not something that can come about from true civilization. This is one of the important things we recognize from the Islamic perspective. The concept of the aql is grounded in morality, ethics, our value system. That's number one. Number two, we mentioned that the difference between the aql in the Islamic perspective and Western philosophy is that from the Islamic perspective, it is tied to our worldview. When you talk about engaging in a rational evaluation, right? When you are using your reason to evaluate something, you are using your value system. You are using your worldview. You are using your understanding of what is the nature of existence. Why do you exist? What makes my life worth living? Why does my existence matter? What is my purpose in life? Where did I come from? Where will I go after I die? All of these big questions of life, Islam provides you with answers. It provides you with a worldview. So when you understand your purpose in life, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I'm going to place on this earth a khalifa, a vicegerent, a moral custodian. You understand that your purpose in this life is connected to this obligation to strive to spread virtue, al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar, to strive to spread virtue and to prevent evil, to enjoin what is good, to forbid what is wrong. That is our moral purpose and duty in this worldly life. And so, when you understand this purpose and this worldview, that allows you to use your aql, to use your thought process in a way that will lead to beneficial results. In a way that will lead to beneficial results. Whereas if your worldview is something like an ideology that is self-serving, like liberalism, which tells you that the fundamental value in society is maximizing people's freedom to pursue their own desires, to pursue their own personal pleasure, and in gratification of the nafs. If that's your ultimate value, then the way you use your aql will lead to maximizing that result. Your aql is goal-directed, right? Your intellect will lead to whatever goal you set from the outset. So if your ultimate purpose is, protecting the political interests of the rich and powerful, then you will see how people use their aql, their rationality, is for that purpose. And you see the arguments that people engage in when you talk about the issue of the genocide in Gaza, their arguments are not designed to talk about what is moral and what is immoral. Their arguments are structured in a way to try to defend what is happening. They've already decided that this is something that I agree with, and they're trying to come up with more terminology, more false analogies to just further those arguments. So they're not getting at the meat of the issue because they've already made that decision. So that's number two. So number one was the Islamic concept of the aql is tied to morality. Number two is the Islamic concept of the aql is also tied to our worldview. Okay? Number three, what is another point that we mentioned about the difference between the Islamic concept of the aql and the concept of reason or rationality in Western philosophy? What's the third point that we mentioned? Yes?
We talked about how in Western society, knowledge, for example,
right. Excellent. Okay, this is a really good point. So from the Islamic perspective, the concept of the aql is tied to action. The concept of intelligence is tied to how one acts. You can't say, oh, he's a really smart person, but he does stupid actions. It doesn't make sense. Your actions are part of your rationality. The way that you behave in this world is part of the way that you think about the world, right? So our actions are connected with that. And whereas in Western philosophy, reason is completely detached from one's actions. How you act, what you consider right and wrong, and how you behave doesn't have any impact on your concept of intelligence. That's an excellent point. What else? Number 4. From the sisters, any point that we haven't mentioned yet? Right? Okay, so we mentioned that the concept of religiosity from an Islamic perspective, the concept, what it means to be a good Muslim, is encompassing the concepts of ethics and morals. So, from the Islamic perspective, The term aql not only encompasses morality, but it also encompasses religiosity. It also encompasses spirituality. It also encompasses our entire relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can one call themselves al-aqil, a wise, intelligent, rational person, but they don't take care of the most important things, those actions that will have eternal consequences for them, those actions that will determine their salvation in the hereafter? How can a person call themselves intelligent, but they prefer the dunya, which is temporary and transient, over al-akhirah, which is everlasting? How can a person call themselves intelligent and rational and they neglect their responsibilities and duties before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they neglect the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears and sees all that they do? These are fundamental concepts which are connected to our understanding of rationality. Our theology, our spirituality, our religiosity is also connected to the concept of rationality. So that was number 4. Number 5, what's another point that we mentioned so far? How about the concept of reading? What did we say about this? Who can remind us? The note takers. MashaAllah, the note takers. You have it all in your notes. It's too late. Yes. Right. Yes, excellent. So let's make these two separate points. So number 5, the concept of knowledge in the West is reduced to just information. Whereas from the Islamic perspective, the concept of knowledge is guidance, hidayah. So from the Western perspective, knowledge is just data, just information. And that's why anybody can Google the same information and they can become an instant expert. They can debate online, right? Whereas from the Islamic perspective, knowledge is hidayah, it's guidance. It's not just information, it's an understanding of what information is relevant to the context that you're in that will lead you to act in the ways that will produce ethical results. That is the understanding of hidayah. Guidance takes you on a direction. It takes you on a direction. Right? If somebody asks you where to go and you tell them, oh, your destination is 5 kilometers away. Okay, that's just information. But you have to take them with the step by step through the guidance. You know, travel on this road. When you get to Trafalgar, turn right. Then you go to Burnhamthorpe, turn right. You know, you have to give them the direction so they will get to their destination. That is hidayah. It is guidance. It leads a person to where they want to go. So our goal in life, we want the hidayah. We're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 17 times a day, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us on the straight path. We want the hidayah to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to become true worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to become the true representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth, to be a true Khalifa on this earth, to take care of the rights of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to establish justice on this earth, to establish rahmah, mercy and compassion on this earth. We want hidayah to do all these things. We don't want just, data that doesn't give us hidayah. We want guidance on how to achieve these outcomes. And the next point that was mentioned, which we will say is number 6, is the difference between being an image-based culture, which is what we find in Western society, in which many authors in the West have written about this, versus being a culture grounded in reading and knowledge. And we mentioned that many historians, including non-Muslim historians, who study Islamic history, they talk about how the Islamic civilization is all about knowledge. There's a book by Franz Rosenthal, Knowledge Triumphant, about Islamic civilization. The whole concept of Islamic civilization is about knowledge, right? It's grounded in knowledge. The revelation begins with the command, Iqra, the command to read, right? And read includes both recitation and also the word Iqra also gives us the lesson of the importance of reading from books and preserving the knowledge through both oral and written means. So the Islamic emphasis on knowledge throughout history produced a culture and a civilization that, wrote thousands and thousands of libraries, right, around the Muslim world. It was a culture that was attached to the idea that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it must also entail seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge is part of our concept of religiosity. Right? There's so many ahadith, there's so many evidences in Islam that show the virtue of seeking knowledge. So seeking knowledge is something that is included within our concept of the aql. Right? Within our concept of the aql, you can't just sit at home and go on social media and you don't seek any knowledge and just start tweeting your own opinions, right? From an Islamic perspective, this is not aql. It doesn't matter how many followers you have on Twitter. You'll never be al-aqil if you do that. You have to connect yourself and immerse yourself in the knowledge. And you have to read books. You have to pick up the books and read the books. And then we talked about how that's so hard today in today's culture where people are just used to not even videos, TikToks, right? They're just used to like 30-second clips. They can't even sustain their attention to listen to a full lecture. How can they even pick up a book and read? Our scholars not only picked up books, but they wrote books that if you spent your whole lifetime trying to read what they wrote and understand what they wrote, you wouldn't be able to. SubhanAllah, it's amazing that a scholar like Imam al-Nawawi, he died in his 40s. And yet, he's one of the most prolific authors in the history of Islam. One of the most prolific authors in the history of Islam. Who knows what are some of the works that Imam al-Nawawi wrote? He died 676 Hijri, yes. Right, so he has a short book on the 40 hadith. He collected 40 hadith. Yes, Al-Arba'in al-Nawawi. What else? He wrote the commentary on Sahih Muslim, the most famous commentary written on Sahih Muslim. A massive commentary on Sahih Muslim. Okay, what else? Another book, yes. Riyadh al-Salihin. Riyadh al-Salihin is such a beneficial work of hadith that you'll find it in every Muslim, almost every Muslim household, right? This work, look at the barakah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with, that he compiled this. He also wrote one of the greatest works of Islamic law in the history of Islam. He wrote one of the greatest works of Islamic law, Al-Majmu' in Shafi'i fiqh. So Imam al-Nawawi was a massive, massive giant, and he subhanAllah, he died in his 40s. Look at how much he wrote. They say that if you were to divide up the amount of writing that he did, in the number of days that he could have written, like in his entire adult life, it's like he wrote several full notebooks in a single day. Like if in a single day, wrote not just one notebook, several notebooks. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but subhanAllah, just a massive amount of writing. And you can't write that much without reading. So how much was he reading to also produce that kind of writing? So our scholars of Islam, they had an immense involvement in knowledge production that we have to revive. So how many points we mentioned so far? 6, I believe, right? Anything else that we mentioned that anyone wants to point out? There's one point that was already mentioned that I didn't list in the points. Number 7, the Western concept of intelligence and reason and rationality restricts it to a very narrow domain, which they call the IQ, which really doesn't even include all types of reasoning. It's just a few types of spatial, numerical, geometrical reasoning. This is IQ. Even psychologists criticize this concept and talk about how we have many other types of reasoning that aren't encompassed within this. We have social intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. But then from the Islamic perspective, we can critique that even more and add the additional types of intelligence and wisdom that we gain from connecting ourselves with divine revelation. Number 8, we also mentioned that the Islamic concept of rationality, the aql, is connected to the fitrah. It is connected to the fitrah. It is natural. It doesn't bring human beings with something that is foreign to their natural sense. It doesn't tell them that, reason means you deny what is good and what is bad. Reason means that you distrust this or that or whatever. The Islamic concept brings what the fitrah recognizes. To live your life striving for justice, to live your life pursuing the truth, to live your life worshiping your Creator, to live your life striving to embody virtue, right? Not to chase after your desires, right? The Islamic perspective brings what is in tune with the human fitrah, the primordial nature of the human being, the natural sensibility of the human being. And this is why people hearing the message of Islam, just from listening to the message of Islam, they recognize the truth and they embrace Islam. So many people have embraced Islam during the genocide in Gaza because now they're seeing what's happening and they're thinking, what is the faith of these people in Gaza? And they read about Islam and they recognize, this is, subhanAllah, this is the truth. They don't need some complicated philosophical argument to convince them. Oh, this is how you can know that God exists and this is how you can know that the Prophet was... You read the message of Islam, you recognize this is the true message because it is in agreement with the human fitrah, with the natural sense of the human being. So that is number, which number was that? 8. Okay. Number 9, the Western method of rationality is based on skepticism. Is based on skepticism and distrust. You know, they say, question everything. Question everything. You know, doubt everything. So if you make doubt your starting point, you cannot actually build any knowledge because whatever you think you know, you will start to doubt that. So the person who tells you doubt everything, you ask them, should I even doubt that I should doubt everything? You know, skepticism is self-refuting. And I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but there was one philosopher in the West who tried to take skepticism to its logical conclusion. His name was Pyrrho, a Greek philosopher. His students had to prevent him from walking off cliffs. They would try to hold him back. And he'd say, what are you doing? They say, there's a cliff here, you're going to walk off the cliff. And he would say, but how do I know it's a cliff? I'm doubting my senses. I see that there's a cliff, but what if I'm hallucinating? Right? And the Quran talks about the same attitude of skepticism. That, you know, for example, Bani Israel said, وَقَالُوا لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكَ حَتَّى نَرَى اللَّهَ جَهْرًا. They said to Musa ﷺ, we'll never believe in you unless we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. Right? Many instances in the Quran where it talks about the skeptical attitude of the Quraysh. And we see this problem, you know, where imagine a student doubts every single thing the teacher says. They will not be able to gain the basic concepts in order to build their knowledge. So the fitrah gives you your starting point. You can either build upon that, and that's what Islam gives you, or you can start by doubting everything, and you start subtracting and you go down. Right? So that is radical skepticism. Radical skepticism. You deny everything, you doubt everything, and you end up with a society that is morally confused, intellectually confused, hyperpolarized. People don't know what is right and what is wrong. People don't know what is up and what is down. Right? Every single thing becomes something to be doubted. Right? So we mentioned 9 points so far, and we'll mention the 10th that we also talked about, is that the 10th point is that Islam connects us with a tradition of wisdom. Right? It's not individualistic. It connects us with a tradition of wisdom where you can go to learn from these scholars, to learn from their examples, who learned from the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who learned from the prophets, from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and all the prophets, the wisdoms of the prophets, right? We gain that, the wisdom that comes from divine revelation, we gain that by studying and immersing ourselves and connecting ourselves with scholars who studied and learned that wisdom. And we'll talk about that today as well, inshaAllah ta'ala. So with that, any questions about that summary? Yes?
Another one that you mentioned about that Islam is the only that doesn't have the baggage of the West, in the sense that we don't have the church and state, the people of the knowledge and the Reformation, they have a problem with science, or science is a problem with religion. But Islam is the only book that actually says, look at natural phenomena, look at the geology, look at the...
Excellent, you're right. So we can add this number 11, that from the Islamic perspective, there is no such thing as science versus religion. Because we have the signs of Allah in nature and the signs of Allah in scripture. So we don't have the same conflict that emerged in European history, where the church was on one side and you had people like Galileo on the other side, for example. So you had this history of experiencing the oppressive nature of religious institutions that led to the creation of secularism. Right? Led to this idea that we have to remove and displace religion from public society. So that was another point that we mentioned. Jazakallah khair. Excellent. All right. So inshallah ta'ala, now we're going to return to the book. And for those who are attending for the first time, again, I'll mention the book. And for those who have been attending, it's a reminder of the author and what the book is. So the book is written by Ibn Hibban al-Busti, Abu Hatim Ibn Hibban al-Busti. Actually, you have to remember his kunya is Abu Hatim, because throughout the book he will say, Qala Abu Hatim. And you'll be like, who's this? Who's this Abu Hatim? Right? That's him. He's the author is speaking. Right? That's how Muslim scholars, they would frequently write. They would mention the narration or whatever they're quoting, and then they would mention their own commentary under it. So he says, Qala Abu Hatim. So his name is Abu Hatim Ibn Hibban al-Busti, and he died 354 years after the hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So he's like 1,100 years before us that he was writing and discussing these ideas. He traveled to 40 cities over 40 years, learning from all the wisdom of different scholars, and he compiled this book, Rawdatul Uqala, Gardens of the Intelligent, talking about the different qualities of wisdom from an Islamic perspective. And we mentioned in the introduction, the muqaddimah, why he wrote the book. He saw that people had interpreted what it means to be an intellectual in a way that's different from the Islamic understanding. They took it as, wearing fancy clothes, having fancy speech, and they took it as compromising one's values, being hypocritical to one's identity as a Muslim. And then he explains what the true concept of the aql is. And the first hadith that he mentions in the book is, who remembers this? The first hadith that is mentioned in the book. Yes. Allah loves good character. Yeah. So the very first hadith he mentions is, Inna Allah yuhibbu makarim al-akhlaqi wa yakrahu safsafaha. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the traits of good character, noble character, and Allah despises bad character. Allah despises bad character. And he mentions, why is he mentioning this hadith about moral character at the beginning of a work that is about the aql? He says that akhlaq is nafsul aql. That makarim al-akhlaq is nafs al-aql. It is the essence of what reason, the intellect is. The essence of the intellect is to lead us to these ethical virtues. Right? So that's one of the things that he mentioned. And we quoted some of the other quotations, and we're going to continue, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll be mentioning from قال أبو حاتم العقل نوعان مطبوع ومسموع.
قال أبو حاتم رضي الله عنه: العقل نوعان مطبوع ومسموع، فالمطبوع منهما كالأرض والمسموع كالبذر والماء، ولا سبيل للعقل المطبوع أن يخلص له عمل محصول دون أن يرد عليه العقل المسموع فينبهه من رقدته ويطلقه من مكامنه، كما يستخرج البذر والماء من قعور الأرض من كثرة الريع. فالعقل الطبيعي من باطن الإنسان كموضع عروق الشجرة من الأرض، والعقل المسموع من ظاهره كتدلي ثمرة الشجرة من فروعها.
نعم. So he mentions that the aql is of two types. Matbu', imprinted, natural, what you already are born with, and masmu', that which you hear, which you learn, which you listen to from others, which you acquire. So there is the natural intellect and the acquired intellect from the Islamic perspective. So natural intellect, people are born with different capabilities. Right? People are born with different capabilities and different strengths in different areas. And he likens this to the soil. The soil can be fertile, the soil can be dry, it can be different, right? And then the education is the aql al-masmu'a, the acquired intellect, which comes and nourishes the soil and causes the seed to grow and to sprout. So somebody may come to a class and mashallah, they have an excellent memory. That's their strength. Whatever they hear, they learn it immediately. That's great natural intellect, but they also need to have the acquired intellect that they pay attention in class, right? That they support their natural memory by asking good questions, that they write, they do these different things to gain that guidance. Somebody else may have their natural intellect, their natural intellectual strength might be that they are very good at thinking outside the box. So the teacher is mentioning a lesson and they think about all the different ways to implement this. All the different ways to implement these lessons and guidance in their life. So to give you an example, it's mentioned about Imam Shafi'i Imam al-Shafi'i, he's the founder of the Shafi'i school of fiqh. He died 204 Hijri. He was also the teacher of one of the other four Imams. Who is the one who is, out of the four Imams, his student? Yes? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So, the son of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he would always hear his father praising Imam al-Shafi'i. So, he decided one day to observe him in the masjid. So the story goes. So, at night, after everyone had prayed Salat al-Isha and got at home, he saw that Imam al-Shafi'i was sitting in the masjid, and he kind of watched from a distance, like, I'm going to see how much Salat al-Tahajjud he prays, how much Qiyam al-Layl he prays, what is he doing, what's making my father praise him so much. And he saw the whole night that he's just sitting there. He's just sitting there with his eyes closed. He thinks, what's going on? So he goes to his father and he says, this is what I saw. His father says, SubhanAllah, you're spying on Imam al-Shafi'i? He says, well, I wanted to see, what's going on. So Imam Ahmad says, come, let's go ask him. So he asks him, what were you doing last night? And Imam al-Shafi'i says, the whole night I was thinking about one hadith from which I extracted over 70 rulings. And now I'm going to tell you what that hadith is. It's not a long hadith. The whole hadith is really just one sentence. The hadith is, Ya Aba Umair ma fa'al al-Nughayr. I'll explain what it means. But from this one sentence, he extracted 70 rulings. Okay, what is this hadith? Hadith is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ went to visit the family of Anas ibn Malik. And as Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh, he had a younger brother whose pet bird had died. The pet bird, he had a little pet bird like a parrot or something, and the bird died. And so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said to the young boy, when his pet bird died, he said, Ya Aba Umair, O Abu Umair, ma fa'al al-Nughayr. What did the little bird do? Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ is trying to cheer up the little boy, and so he says this phrase. From this statement, Imam al-Shafi'i spent the whole night thinking about it and extracted 70 rulings. Now if we think about this, maybe we can come up with a few, right? We think about the permissibility of having a pet, the permissibility of giving a kunya, a nickname, Abu Umair, to a child, the encouragement to try to counsel, or give glad tidings, to give comfort a child, right, when they're feeling sad. All of these different things, right? He came up with over 70, right? Over 70. Now, when you think about that mind that can come up with so many rulings, by just thinking about this hadith, it shows you this is the difference with the aql matbu', not just aql masmu'. We don't have aql masmu' of Imam al-Shafi'i, but we also don't have the aql matbu' as well, right? We have not gained the knowledge, the vast knowledge and wisdom, but also, mashallah, this shows a natural gift, right? A natural gift that he exercised in the study of the deen and extracting these rulings. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given everyone different natural talents. And one of the things that we need to do with ourselves is we need to study the deen and learn the deen so we can develop these natural talents, to use our natural talents to serve the ummah. To use our natural talents to develop them and cultivate them to serve the ummah. And I wrote an article for Yaqeen Institute on spiritual personality, which relates to this concept that, just as people talk about having different personality types, this one's an introvert, this one's an extrovert. In the same way, there are spiritual personality types Islam teaches us. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he was once asked, how come you're spending all your time just teaching the deen? Why aren't you involved in other acts of worship? Why don't you just forget about doing these halaqas and teaching? Just go spend all your time reading Quran and praying, right? Or all your time, in the expeditions, the military expeditions, defending the frontiers of the Muslim lands. And Imam Malik said, rahimahullah, he said, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided the a'mal, the actions, the types of righteous actions, the way He has divided the rizq. So just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided His provisions, His wealth amongst people differently, in the same way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided up the actions. So somebody may excel in voluntary prayer, somebody may excel in voluntary charity, somebody may excel in teaching and studying the deen. There are many different gates for a person to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Islam. We all have to do the foundations, which are the wajibat, the obligatory actions. But when you've taken care of the required actions, there are many additional ways to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the nawafil, through the voluntary actions. So part of the aql, a part of wisdom is to connect your aql matbu' with the aql masmu'. To connect your natural talent, your natural capabilities and natural strengths in your rationality, in your reasoning, in your abilities to the type of guidance from Islam that will help you cultivate that so you can better serve the ummah. So you can better serve the ummah. Any questions about this concept? Is it clear? So the question is the natural intellect fixed or can it change, right? Can somebody just say, Khalas, Habibi, I'm born stupid. You know, what can I do? I can't understand this. No, the answer is, with the aql masmu', with the learned, acquired intellect, you can make up for any deficiencies in the natural intellect. You can not only build on strengths, you can also build on weaknesses, right? So somebody with sufficient training, maybe they had something that's a weakness, but they work hard, they build on it, they can attain a level that is higher than somebody who's born with that as a strength, right? So that's the other thing. We have to also realize that whatever, things we might think are our weaknesses, maybe somebody says, oh, I'm not a very organized person. I have difficulty organizing my schedule and my tasks and everything. Okay, well, you can use different tools to improve that. Right? Somebody says, I'm not good at time management. I don't have that type of aql matbu'. You can develop that. Can be developed through training, discipline, looking at the guidance of the Quran and Sunnah, the guidance of scholars of Islam, how they use their time, and putting that into practice. Aql is not just theory, it's also practice, right? So because it's also actions, you can build up. That whatever you feel that you're missing on something, you can build it up. So the ways are open for everyone to build and excel in every department. But we wouldn't call that aql matbu', we would call that aql masmu'. It's acquired. Does that answer the question? Okay, excellent. So any other questions about this before we move to the next narration? Okay, so we'll continue with the next narration. تفضل.
رقم 6 number 6.
Yes.
حدثني ابن عامر قال قلت لعطاء بن أبي رباح يا أبا محمد ما أفضل ما أعطي العبد قال عقل عن الله.
العقل عن الله. نعم. So in this narration, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, who's one of the students of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he's from the generation of the Tabi'een. He is asked, ما أفضل ما أعطي العبد? What is the most virtuous thing that a servant can be given? So we already saw the statement in the last class of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, that the best thing a servant can be given is gharizatu aql, right? The intellect's ability to make good judgments. Here, he mentions also the aql, but he says, al-aqlu anillah. The aql from Allah, or about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's two ways to understand it. One is that it is the aql that is given to you as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the best thing that you can be given. Whether it's natural or whether it's acquired, whatever aql that it comes to you, it is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever knowledge you have, it is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So we see, for example, in the Quran, that whatever knowledge we have, we should attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Musa alayhi salam goes to Khidr, he says to him, هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. He says, can I follow you so that you can teach me from the wisdom that you have been taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So he attributes the knowledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Attributes the knowledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas you have the bad example of Qarun, who says about all his wealth, إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. I've been given all of this because I'm such a smart guy, right? Because I have this knowledge. So he attributes it to himself. So we learn from the statement of Ata ibn Abi Rabah that the Islamic attitude is to recognize that the virtue is the virtue of the intellect that we have, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever knowledge, whatever education, whatever reasoning, whatever rationality, whatever intellectual cognitive skills we possess, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take it away in an instant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take it away in an instant. One of the things that I see in my practice as a medical doctor treating, diagnosing neurological disorders is how the aql that we take for granted can be taken away from us. You have, whether it's a young patient who has an aneurysm or a traumatic brain injury and they suffer brain damage, right? Or a patient who has a stroke or undergoes dementia. All the different conditions a person can go through remind us that the aql is something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have it, we should use it for good. Otherwise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take it away at any instant. We should not take our aql for granted. So that is another wisdom that we get from that meaning. And by the way, since I mentioned that statement of Musa alayhi salam to Khidr, that can I follow you so that I can learn from you the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught you? I'll mention that Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, in his work Mafatih al-Ghaib, his tafsir work, he mentions from this one statement, I believe it's 9 different ways that Musa alayhi salam is showing the etiquettes of learning in this one statement. 9 different ways, right? How he's first mentioning, can I follow you, rather than mentioning your. Can you teach me first? He's saying first, I want to follow you. He's mentioning, this knowledge is wisdom. He's mentioning that the reason why he wants to follow him, and so on. He mentions different ways. Now, al-aqlu anillah can also mean the intellect, the rationality, the understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the best thing a servant is given is to have a comprehension, a rational comprehension, to have understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And both meanings are true and both are complementary. The aql is the best thing that can be given to a servant because it is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also within the aql, all the things that we understand using our aql, the best thing we can use our aql for is to understand who is our creator, why did he create us, why did he create us, what is our purpose in life, how do we come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are the divine names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how do we strive to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through those divine names and attributes. So the aql, al-aqlu anillah, means that we also understand Allah's rahmah. You understand Allah's justice. You understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's revelation that He has given us. All of this is connected to the concept of the aql. So the best thing a person can be given is the understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the understanding of their creator. And this shows us from the Islamic perspective, there is a hierarchy of knowledge. Whereas you don't get that, again, in Western philosophy, right? Whether somebody wants to spend all their time studying, the history of video gaming. Let's make up something totally random, right? Or whether somebody wants to use their intellect to discover a new cure for a disease. Both of these are specialties somebody can equally, choose to go into. And there's no reason why society would tell somebody you should do this or you should do that. Right? People say, do whatever makes you happy, do whatever fulfills your desires. But from the Islamic understanding, there are priorities. And the most important priority for the servant is to understand who their Lord is, to understand their Creator, to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that comprehension of our Creator, the comprehension of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, understanding who Allah is, that is the basis and the bedrock for everything else that we use our aql for. We understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created us all, and He created the creation for His wise purposes. So therefore we will use our aql, to take care of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to alleviate their suffering, to help benefit the creation, because we're striving to fulfill our purpose to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see how every goal you make in your life using your aql will ultimately tie back to this goal of connecting your mind to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Connecting your mind and your thoughts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll go to the next We'll go to the statement of Ibn Hibban under number 7, inshallah. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Yes.
Even though he says that, but Khidr says to him, how you won't be able to learn because of lack of patience or something. This, because in one way you're saying that he will learn, but the other party is saying you won't be able to learn.
He doesn't say you won't be able to learn. He says you won't be able to have patience. You won't be able to have patience to follow me. Not that you won't learn anything, right? So there's a difference between the two. Now, what Imam al-Razi was mentioning is this statement of Musa alayhi salam shows the etiquettes of how to ask your teacher, the etiquettes of how to seek guidance. And what did Musa alayhi salam learn, right? What he learned at the end was about the divine decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about how there's a reality of the unseen that we don't know as human beings. So he did learn from the process, right? So there is a learning that takes place, but it's not a conventional type of learning, right? So that's the difference. But what Khidr alayhi salam is saying is not negating Musa alayhi salam, but is giving him a disclaimer, He's not saying, no, you can't follow me, you're not going to learn anything from me. He's like, you can follow me, but you won't be able to have patience with what you're going to see. It's like a disclaimer. Does that answer the question?
But how is that different than our current condition, in which most of us are not patient with what we're seeing? The examples you keep on bringing up, and so on. Right? In the sense, we don't really know the divine decree. We don't really know how this would be an impetus to something else.
Well, in a sense, it is analogous, and that's where we can apply the lesson from Musa alayhi salam and Khidr's story to what we're seeing today. That there is an element of the unseen wisdom taking place behind what's going on in Gaza that we're not aware of, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be there for the people of Gaza, even if we don't know how that's going to happen. That for sure the victory will come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is a lesson we can extract from the story and apply to our times as well.
I think there may
Yes.
be some confusion if I answer the question right. What Musa did wasn't wrong, and he was questioning. That's exactly what Khidr was saying, that you will not be able to have patience with me. So he didn't have patience. As Musa, with his worldly knowledge, he was trying to basically question some of the actions that he considered to be wrong, which we should be doing as well. So he wasn't doing anything wrong. But then there was another reality that he learned later on.
Excellent, yeah. So the point was that that was mentioned is that Musa alayhi salam was not doing anything wrong by asking those questions. It's something that one would expect any of us in the same position to do. But there was another reality that he learned through that process. Now, we'll continue inshallah.
قال أبو حاتم رضي الله عنه فالواجب على العاقل أن يكون بما أحيا عقله من الحكمة أكلف منه بما أحيا جسده من القوت لأن قوت الأجسام المطاعم وقوت العقل الحكم فكما أن الأجساد تموت عند فقد الطعام والشراب كذلك العقول إذا فقدت قوتها من الحكمة ماتت والتقلب في الأمصار والاعتبار بخلق الله مما يزيد المرء عقلا وإن عدم المال في تقلبه.
So this is a beautiful statement that he mentions. So he says, it is wajib, it is obligatory on a rational person, on a wise person, that they bring to life their aql through hikmah, through wisdom. And they take more responsibility to do that than they would take to feeding their own body with food. In other words, he says that you have food for the body, right? The meals that you eat are food for your body. What is the food for your aql? Right, so we've talked about the aql now. What is the food that feeds the aql? How do we feed our aql? How do we let it grow? Yes. Knowledge and wisdom. What he's mentioning is wisdom, hikmah. So hikmah, he says, is the food that feeds the aql, that feeds the mind, right? So it is important, it is obligatory for a person to focus on feeding their aql. Like when you get up in the morning, you think about this, you start thinking, okay, what am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for dinner? But how much do we think about, what am I going to feed my aql today? What new hikmah am I going to learn today? What book will I read today? What lesson of a scholar will I listen to today? What lecture will I listen to? What halaqah will I attend today? What hikmah will I feed my aql? Because keep in mind, you can't be static. If you're not increasing in knowledge or in guidance and hikmah and wisdom, for sure you're decreasing. Because when the aql is not being nourished and fed, what's going to happen? It's going to wither away. So he says, just like the body dies when it doesn't have food or drink, in the same way the uqul, the intellects, when they are deprived of their provision from what is wisdom, they will also die. They will get malnourished. So think about this. What does it look like to have a malnourished intellect? What does it look like to have a malnourished intellect? And what does a society with a malnourished intellect look like? And what does a civilization with a malnourished intellect look like? SubhanAllah. We talked before about how people talked about how social media is making our nation stupider, right? People are spending more time online and engaging in useless debates and just pressing the like button and just writing stuff to trigger viral content rather than engaging in what will develop their minds, their intellects. Reading books. We have an image-based culture. People watch lots of television shows, go to the movies, watch TikTok reels or YouTube reels. I don't know which one is called a reel, but they would rather do that rather than developing their aql through acquiring hikmah. This is a very profound point. When I read this, it really it astonished me. And it also astonished me because I was thinking about a lecture I had heard from a non-Muslim psychologist, Professor John Vervaeke, at the University of Toronto. He gave a lecture on the meaning crisis, actually a series of lectures, podcast series about the meaning crisis, awakening from the meaning crisis. And he starts by explaining that there's a problem in modern culture, Western society, which is that people have been disconnected and detached from sources of meaning. And now people find that there's a meaning crisis, right? There's a meaning crisis. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of my existence? And he explains that at the beginning of his lectures, he often asks his psychology students, he says, where do you go to for knowledge of medicine? A doctor. Right? Where do you go for knowledge of chemistry? A chemist. Where do you go for knowledge of engineering? Engineer. Where do you go for knowledge of law? Lawyer. Where do you go for wisdom? Nobody has any answer. Now we believe wisdom exists, right? There's something about, you can behave wisely or unwisely, but where do you go for that knowledge? How do you acquire that knowledge? He says, we don't talk about that as a society. And that is a problem anyone can recognize. You don't have to be Muslim to recognize that problem. And then he talks about how wisdom was typically found in religion. And because society has removed religion, it has lost the sources of wisdom. So he says, how are we going to get wisdom back? Right? And that shows you the same thing that Ibn Hibban mentioned 1,100 years earlier. Right? That the aql is nourished through wisdom, hikmah. And when you read the works of Muslim scholars, when you immerse yourself in the Quran and the Sunnah and you take out lessons, those lessons that you're taking out, that is what hikmah is. Hikmah are those lessons that you take from the Quran, from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, from the example of the companions, from the teachings of scholars. Those are hikam, right? Hikam is the plural of hikmah. Those are wisdoms that you can apply in your life. And he mentions there are many sources of wisdom. He mentions two things here, which we don't often realize are part of religious learning. Right? We think that, you want to gain hikmah, it's just from reading books. No, the two things that he mentioned here are not related to reading books. He mentions التقلب في الأمصار, which is traveling in the land. Traveling in the land is a source of wisdom. How is that the case? How does traveling increase a person in wisdom? Yes. You brought in your horizons, you understand different cultures, right? You go to different lands, you meet people from different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. Yes? Gain new experiences, meet new people. Right, okay, excellent. Explore geographical knowledge. So a little personal anecdote. So I grew up in Ontario, right? And this is where I did my undergrad, my medical school. And like most people who grew up in Ontario, I thought I'm never going to leave Ontario. I thought all of Canada is Ontario. And yet, you know, I had the opportunity, and then I traveled to do my residency in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in the middle of nowhere. Right? And then after that, I did my fellowship in Calgary, Alberta. And I also worked for a little bit in BC. I had the opportunity to go there and do a locum there. So I traveled to different provinces, and it enhanced my understanding as a medical doctor, because now, when I come back to the Ontario, I bring solutions and wisdoms that I've learned from how medicine has been practiced in different hospitals in different regions, right? And it also enhanced my understanding of the different communities, the different dynamics, right? Different wisdoms of what I've seen in different masajid in different communities across Canada, different challenges people are facing, and different solutions that they come up with. So this was something I personally gained from that experience of traveling through the land. So one of the important lessons that we have to realize and really revive, especially in our culture today, where we tend to be not just in a bubble in one city, but really in a bubble in one one room in one house. Like people don't even travel from their room to go visit, you know, their parents, right, in the living room, right? They stay in one room in their house on their phone or on their computer. You have to get out of your room. You have to get out of the house. You have to get out of your bubble and travel through the lands. And travel today doesn't involve going outside of your bubble as much as it used to involve in the time of these scholars. If you really think about it, growing up in the time of these scholars, imagine Imam Ibn Hibban himself. He's growing up in modern day Afghanistan. When he travels, he doesn't have any phone to talk to his family back home, to talk to the people that he knows. Everywhere he goes, he's meeting entirely new people. Entirely new people. He's a stranger wherever he goes. Right? He's traveling to 40 different cities. He's a complete stranger. And he stays away from home 40 years just traveling and studying from different people. Imagine how that develops you as a person when you're outside of your bubble. You're completely just having to make new connections, meet new people, meet new people, meet new people. So this is another thing, and I think it's an important lesson also in the Muslim community, that sometimes when people come to the masjid, they only talk to the people that they know. And this is a problem. Because one of the sources of wisdom that we see is to go outside of your bubble. And you have to meet new people. And when you meet people, I notice also sometimes the conversations are very superficial. People don't even know how to have a conversation. Right? They meet new people and they say, okay, how's the weather? Right? That's it. But when you meet a new person, realize that this is a source of potential wisdom for you. This person has an encyclopedia of personal experiences that you've never had. What can I learn from their experiences? So the first thing that I do, like when I meet a new person, I try to understand something from their life. You know, where did you grow up? Oh, you grew up in for example, oh, you grew up in Qatar. Tell me about Qatar, right? Or you grew up in Pakistan. Tell me about that, right? What is your line of work? Oh, you work in this industry. Oh, tell me about this, right? You gain wisdom from that. Oh, which masjid do you go? You go, what's the community like there? You ask them questions. And you start to see in people a potential source of wisdom that also helps build stronger connections. And the community becomes stronger. So this is a huge and profound lesson we're getting from one point that Ibn Hibban mentions. And then the other point that he mentions is the point about al-i'tibaru bi khalqillah, that considering the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we mentioned that the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not just in scripture or in books, they are also in nature. So when we study the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is also something that increases a person in hikmah. And look at how the Quran gives us analogies from the natural world. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ كَمَثَلِ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ اتَّخَذَتْ بَيْتًا. The example of those who take others to be worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are, or who take protectors besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are like the spider that creates its home. And the weakest home is the home of the spider. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us an analogy from nature. So the more you understand about that natural world, the world of the spider, the more you will deepen your understanding and your reflection on this particular lesson. And it's showing us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from us that we do have an awareness of the natural world, that we do have an awareness of what is the world of the spider like. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us these analogies. Now,
actually, if you look at the house of the spider, like, back in the Prophet's time,
Sallallahu alaihi
they
wasallam.
thought it was